Welcome to Tower Talk Business Radio, where we bring you conversations with the top business minds on Long Island and around the nation every week. Featuring expert consultants and small business owners who have found success but are also willing to share their top tips, failures, and give gritty, matter-of-fact advice based on their firsthand experience. Now, let's get down to business on Tower Talk Business Radio on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Hello and welcome to Tower Talk Business Radio. My name is Ray Schwetz, AVP of Business Banking at Jovia Financial Credit Union, along with Donyshia Boston-Hill, CEO, keeper of the brand marketing and digital agency.
We're focused on being the premier resource for business and entrepreneurship. We bring you weekly business advice, tips, tools, and services that help you grow your business. Plus, we interview some of the top business leaders in the industry.
And I'm so excited today because helping provide us with empowerment is a transformer of the workforce. His name is Ibrahim Jackson. He's the founder and CEO of Ubiquitous Preferred Services Incorporated. Ibrahim is a trainer, management consultant, executive coach, and he upskills folks for our evolving workforce. And we're very grateful to have my good friend on the show today. So, Ibrahim, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we're very excited. So this year, when we met earlier, I would say that we probably had one of the best conversations I've ever had.
Really?
Upon a first meeting, yes.
Wow, that's a lot.
Didn't want it to end. We just really
Keep going at
enjoyed
it. That's right.
Yep.
That's impressive because Ray meets a lot of people.
Yeah, but no one like me.
No one like me. I agree.
Which speaks to our uniqueness as people.
Yes, absolutely. So, and obviously you have a very impressive resume. So I'd like you to share with our listener a little bit about yourself. Tell us your resume and how you got to where you are today.
Certainly. Well, first and foremost, I'm going to say, Donyshia and Ray, thank you so much for having me. So just a quick background on me, my Dun & Bradstreet. Quickly, went to school to be an accountant, worked at a CPA firm, didn't enjoy it, landed in tech because Y2K was pretty interesting, and the Estee Lauder companies is who I went to work for back in 1998. Fell in love with technology, which was really hobby turned career for me. Okay, I learned how to code on my own, et cetera, building websites, and then all of a sudden someone said they would pay me to do it. And so that's just the start of me being a lifelong learner. Started in 1998, finished in 2015 with Estee Lauder Company. So I was there for 17 years, and then I spent 5 years with Computer Science Corporation. They're now known as DXC, which stands for Digital Transformation Company. And the reason this is important is because, you know, typically in this entrepreneur life, what we do is we have experiences, right? We lead teams, we manage budgets, we implement solutions and all of these things. And then you get to that point in your career where you say to yourself, you know what, I think I want to make sure that there's another generation of folks that can at least learn from what I've done, even with the changes that have happened, and then catapult their career somewhere into the stratosphere. So, you know, that's a quick background on me.
And you've worked for some very impressive companies as well. So I'd like to talk a little bit about Estee Lauder and your experience there.
Oh, certainly. So with Estee Lauder companies, I started out, believe it or not, as a help desk technician, right? Because again, it was Y2K and things are going to blow up. And how do we make our Dell computers work? But interestingly enough, I moved up in the executive ranks, did large-scale implementations of system management suites. So we implemented another Long Island-based company, Computer Associates, their Unicenter products. So I was responsible for software delivery, remote control, help desk technology, McAfee's, e-policy orchestrator, all of these things, and to make sure that we were able to implement it globally. And so we did that successfully, went on to be in a role called business relationship management, where, again, I went to school to be an accountant. So I was always a business person who happened to know technology and was, you know, excelled at technology because, again, it was hobby turned career. I was almost like an athlete. You know, you get the contract, you're like, wait, you're going to pay me to do something that I love and would do for free? I'll take it, right? And so, with that background, it was really just an interesting career. Business relationship management helped me to bridge what was happening with our brands and their business, along with what was happening with technology. So we would often say that when I'm with our brands, I represent technology. When I'm with our technology teams, I represent our brands. So acted as that conduit to help, you know, to drive strategy forward with digital enablement.
Now, how did you bridge over to Ubiquitous, and what is your subject matter expertise? And and services.
Absolutely. I'll build into that. So I talked to you about the career journey. I did start Ubiquitous back in 2007 while I was at the Estee Lauder companies as more of a side gig, right? And some people say side hustle, right? But it was that opportunity for us to expand. So if you think about gig workers today, the language always changes, right? So back in the 80s, it was moonlighting. Right. And then it became side hustling, and now it's gig work, right? Where you're doing these projects on your own. And it's not to say, hey, I have a conflict of interest or anything like that, but it's more, how can I grow beyond what I have here within the company? So I learned that if you want to be really, really good, you learn and you apply. If you want to be great, apply and teach. Right. And so back in 2007, when I started Ubiquitous, it was all about, how can I impart my knowledge and wisdom onto others that may be struggling in this space of development within technology, development within relating to their business colleagues. And so when I started Ubiquitous, it was more of a solopreneur lifestyle brand, right? Some extra money, another great vacation. And then in 2019, I decided, okay, it's time to really get real with this and turn things up, especially after my time with DXC, which really opened up my aperture for other industries. So most of my career, I knew lipstick, makeup, fragrance, salon brands, skincare products, right? So that's what I knew on the consumer packaged goods side. And then when I worked for CSC at the time, I was learning more about aerospace and defense, insurance, oil and energy. And if you hear me, I keep saying learning and learning and learning. And as you go into all of these industries, who all, by the way, believe that they're all unique, and they are in some ways, but I would say 15%. 85% of it is pretty consistent and the same across all of them in terms of infrastructure. But the way that they go to market, the products and services that they have do differ. So as I learned from these industries, I said, okay, this is where I need to be, because that was what was energizing me. Always having an opportunity to meet new people, to learn new things, to teach new things, to be challenged on new things, and then bring those back and say, hey, wait, we may have thought about this differently. And I'll tell you, from a Ubiquitous perspective, the reason companies really work with us is because we do bring in that outside-in experience. So if you think about someone who's worked in consumer packaged goods, whether it's your favorite beverage brand, or it's apparel, or if it's cosmetics, you say, okay, I know this world. I know what consumers want. Well, there may be some things that you can learn from the oil and energy space on how they actually leverage technology. Or there's something that you can learn from InsurTech or insurance and what's happening in that space. And so they bring us in because they don't necessarily have the time to be out in all of these different industries like we are.
And I want you to drill down a little bit to talk about the teaching process, because that's when I first met with Ibrahim. One of the things that really impressed me was this process. I've been through so many different training programs, and I know Donyshia,
Yes.
She's been through some excellent training programs. And look, a lot of programs, sometimes you get a really good nugget or two. Sometimes there's a great system, but it doesn't seem to carry through and stay and stick. And what you talked about with me, I was very impressed. So let's talk about that.
Certainly. Well, we know the traditional school format and structure, and as I sit here on Nassau Community College campus, this is not to say that anyone's taking the wrong approach. I just think that we have to think about learning styles, right? And I don't use the term learning preferences; it's more like learning styles. And we're really big on experiential learning. Hands-on learning. We often refer to it as haptic learning, where you actually touch and you feel. Because as human beings, we're the differentiator between the technology. Everyone's talking about generative AI and virtual reality and all these things, but it's really being able to get the hands-on experience that helps to strengthen up that core capability. And so one of the examples I shared with Ray as he invited me out to a golf event, I said, okay, look, I could read every golf magazine in the world and be highly competent in golf. Okay. But the moment that I touch the golf course is when we see how capable I am. right? So that's why we play in the experiential learning space to say, let's be capable. Let's take those learnings and apply them, those applied learnings. And then what's also different is every golf course, which means that now you have to have context, right? You have to have situational awareness of what's happening around you in order to apply the learnings that you have so that it fits in the right space. So while you may be learning from insurance, that's not necessarily the same exact approach you're going to take in consumer goods or in some other industry.
And I can say that, capability is not a necessity when it comes to going on a golf outing. I mean, FYI, you're okay there. So can you share a story about one of the clients that you've worked with? You've worked with some impressive clients, how you kind of guided them through your training process.
Sure. Well, if you think about our work, we provide training, we provide coaching, we provide consulting. And we typically work with large enterprises. Why? Because they have big, complex, and complicated issues. And we pride ourselves on being solution providers and problem solvers. When, as an example, we were working with a consumer packaged goods firm, and it wasn't in makeup, but a consumer packaged goods firm. And the challenge that they were having is that they had their technology folks who, again, in a similar role as me, could not relate to their lines of business. Mm-hmm. Typically in IT, you hear alphabet soup. We have every acronym under the sun you could think of, right? And if I say CIO, what does that mean to you? In the technology world, that's our chief information officer. If I'm in banking, that's the chief investment officer. If I am in a tech firm, that could be your chief innovation officer, right? So sometimes we can get things lost in translation from acronyms. And I had an old CFO, chief financial officer, tell me, he said, Ibrahim, we're trying to reduce the amount of time it takes to communicate our thoughts. And while I get that, sometimes it can actually add more complexity. Much. So just to go back to your question, though, Ray, in terms of how we've helped them, they were having trouble actually connecting in with other leaders. So I had to speak to them more about, one, are we listening, right? How do we perform active listening? And then our teams, what they did was they put in a program that helped them not only with the active listening piece, which I delivered, but then they also took them down this path of how do we engage with them to understand how we can use technology to spark new ideas and innovation and creativity, as well as how could they begin with what the business challenge is, because sometimes technology people look for technology's sake. And your business folks don't always want that. So that's just in one area around tech. And let me throw one other example out if this is okay with you, Ray. And I think we'll get to this point. Many firms in the last 3 years, given some of the events that took place in 2020, came to us around our belonging organization work. Right. And for us, that's all about culture transformation, where we do look at diversity. We do look at inclusion. We do look at belonging. And I always talk about diversity, inclusion, belonging. Equity is woven into that. Parity is woven into that. Justice is woven into that. Diversity is easy because we're all diverse. If you just look at us in the room, we're all diverse. We all come with unique aspects of us, right? It's not only race. It's also about ability. It's also about the way your mind processes and work. When we talk about neuro, we talk about your abilities, right? Whether or not you have it could be blindness and other aspects of it. It could be your sexual orientation, gender identity, or expression. The diversity wheel is vast. So diversity to me is always like sort of the easy part, because it's like, look, you have two people in the room. You've just diversified the room. Now, don't get me wrong. There are these homogenous environments where it's diverse because we're all unique, but everyone looks the same, speaks the same political views, same religion, same schools. Right, which means that you sort of have these blind spots. So we work with teams to help them move from this more homogenous type of format to more of a heterogeneous format, where we don't necessarily look for cultural fit, but we look for cultural add. So it's easy to work in the diversity space, but then it's that inclusion piece. How do I feel valued? How do I feel like I've been seen? How do I feel like I've been heard? How do I feel like my contributions are making a difference? Right? And how do I ensure that we're building up a capability inside where folks recognize that they need to be more than just allies, but also upstanders? So if I'm not in the room, you still represent me in the best way, right? And then we get to belonging. And belonging for us is that culture, right? And you know it because there was a quote that was out that said, what's priceless is when you're a part of someone's story in a positive way. So for us, we always want to help companies and teams get to that state where they say, this is a positive part of my autobiography, and I'm so happy to speak about it.
You are listening to Tara Talk Business Radio on the voice of National Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ray Schwetz, along with Donyshia Boston-Hill, and our guest today is Ibrahim Jackson. He's the founder and CEO of Ubiquitous Preferred Services Incorporated. So Ibrahim, I know, given the comprehensive nature of the work you're doing, I'm sure there's a lot of misconceptions when you meet with someone about who you are, what you do. Can you talk a little about those misconceptions, what you do to kind of get past that?
Certainly. Well, in today's society where you're seeing all of these changes in legislation, et cetera, there's misinterpretation of laws that are out there, which I won't go into depth on right now. But what I'll tell you, where we tend to see there being a misconception or perception of our work is that we like to work with companies that understand that the human beings inside of their organization are the most important assets within their company. Any business owner knows your people are your leverage, right? You stand on the shoulders of giants in order to drive value. And so for those companies, it's easy. They say, listen, we need to develop our folks, whether it's, an upskilling workshop, whether it's using our e-learning platform, Skill Increase, plug, or if it's how do you take us out on tour so that we can see what's happening outside of our four walls. It's really easy to work with those companies. For the companies who look at their folks more as cogs in a machine, unfortunately, they don't necessarily see training and development as a necessary, right? It's more of a discretionary spend. And what ends up happening is if it falls into the discretionary spend bucket and you're facing fiscal or financial headwinds, guess what gets cut, right? The development of your people,
right,
which has an adverse effect because it also has an impact on your product and output.
Now, what are some of your biggest success stories with your clients as well as the challenges you face in your industry?
Yeah, no, this is great. So I'll actually raise Suffolk County, right? So I can do it because it's public record. We came in when the chief diversity officer needed to have an understanding of the sentiment within the company. So let me take a step back and tell you about our 5 capability areas, then I'll tie it back in. So in our belonging organization work, we do 5 things. The first is we help an organization get their belonging organization index. Number 2, we bring in speakers so that folks can get an outside-in perspective on real topics that relate to building belonging organizations. The third is around strategy and ensuring that your DEI strategy is also in alignment with your business strategy. The fourth area is our facilitated workshops, trainings, and focus groups. And the fifth area is where we actually perform culture coaching. And that's typically for people leaders who need a safe space for them to have a conversation about topics that they don't know. Right. And so for most leaders, you can't necessarily have that conversation out in the open, even if you want to be vulnerable. So we like to say we create space for open and honest conversations with approachable people. So those are the 5 capability areas. So Suffolk County, just to go back to them, we actually ran a belonging organization index for them where we did an assessment of all of the different agencies to get sentiment analysis of what was happening. And, there was some really good findings there, right? These are areas that are working really well that we need to amplify. These are areas that really need some focus and attention because, it wasn't necessarily going to help promote the next generation of leaders within different agencies. And then there are other things that were worth status quo. So, that was to really help organizations have more of a radar of what was happening. Where are the weak signals? Where are the loud signals? And then what are the things that we can just sort of run and maintain? So that was one.
Now, what do you like most about your work? I mean, obviously, you're very passionate about what you do. If you had to say, what's the one thing you like most?
The one thing I like most is to see people transform, right? To see people make a mental model shift and look at things through a different lens. Mm-hmm. And for us in our work, we're always driven by helping folks who are coming from a place of curiosity and working in a way that's not culturally destructive. Okay?
Yeah.
If you are coming from a place of malice and harmful intent, I think you need something beyond us, which may be therapy.
Yeah.
Right? No, seriously, it may be therapy, right?
Yeah.
You're just not wired in a way that I can help, our team can help you. But for those who are saying, I'm a bit curious and I want to know, and why and how do we look at things a certain way, that's who we work with. We had a leader in an organization out here on Long Island who, the moment you said diversity, equity, and inclusion, he just shut off, right? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, what if we look at it from the lens of culture transformation? Oh, that sounds, I can work with that. And in my head, I said, okay, we just went from 3 words to 2. And it's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
Right. But again, it's just the atmosphere that we're in today, the way things are working today. So for us, it's really about how do we ensure, just to go back to your question, Ray, I really enjoy seeing people transform and having folks walk up to me. I think I shared with you during our talk, I know, Donyshia, I'm going a little far here. I shared with you during our talk how I was up in Washington State, and we had someone who was talking to me, and they were coming from a place of just not knowing. It was a place of ignorance. Mm-hmm. And she didn't know how to approach specific things. And, I shared with you my brother, who, again, this is my affinity toward helping the disabled community. He was confined to a wheelchair at age 2. He was diagnosed with cancer at age 2. And then he was in a wheelchair for the remainder of his life until he passed away in 1998. He went to SUNY Farmingdale and Stony Brook. And his name is Ibrahim Jackson. We have a scholarship in his name, an endowment at Stony Brook University for all your listeners. But that was his journey. Now, to take it back to Washington State, when we were working with this client, the woman said, well, Ibrahim, okay, so we're going to be vulnerable here. I need to know something because this language confuses me. It changes me. I don't know. You bring up a scenario like your brother, right? I don't know. Do I call him handicapped, crippled? What are the words? Now, when I heard the word crippled, it sort of triggered me. But when you create space in this work, you open yourself up to say, I need to read this situation. And she wasn't coming from a place of malice or harmful intent. It was just a level of ignorance, which she was hungry. She was curious to know more. And to be able to help her make that shift to say, I get it. Because, look, I'm not sure how old you all are, but I come from the Archie Bunker, George Jefferson era, okay? I'm not as sensitive. Maybe we should have been back then. I'm not saying that was right, but time evolves, right? And so we just need to know that we have to embrace change.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something there. I think when people hear the DEI acronym, they immediately get like a little bit defensive because, and from a person who doesn't have malice, it's more of a place of like, I don't want to offend anybody. Like, I want to work with everybody. And, people are uncomfortable in that. So I think that what you're doing by creating that safe space is really making a huge difference. I'll also tell you that from a mentorship standpoint, at least, from my perspective, and I think I speak for Donyshia as well, when she's working with some of her employees, that mentorship, it's a two-way street. I learn a lot more from the folks that work for me, than I learn anywhere else pretty much. And we have to look to that generation for them to teach us.
That's correct.
I really think that that's where you learn the leadership skills is by looking at the folks who are coming up and helping them.
That's right.
So let's jump into some best practices and leadership.
Sure.
Can you give us, 3 to 5 tips that a leader that's out there that's listening can implement and then hopefully follow up with you to bring you into their company?
Sure. I'll start with the latter. So first you do is you call us.
Exactly.
All kidding aside. So leadership tips. So first and foremost, leadership is less about titles, right? Leadership is less about titles. And a good mentor of mine, he said, leadership is defined, whereas if they took your title away, would people still follow you? Mm-hmm. Okay. So the first tip I would say is you have to have empathy and compassion for people. Okay, you have to know them, get to know them, and understand them without a hidden agenda, right? So that's first and foremost. Second is you need to avoid inertia, and that's a mental model shift. Folks today are nervous about things like generative AI taking their job, and it will, right? But it will take their job to new heights and new levels if they allow it to. And what I like to refer to is the Pony Express. How did we get packages however long ago? It was the Pony Express. But today we have Amazon Prime. Same process. I need a package from point A to point B, but there are different capabilities, different skills that are required for it. So when I talk about inertia, make sure that you're keeping an open mind to what can be new. And you'll know it when you start saying, I wish things were back the way they were. right? Well, times have changed, so we have to think about the change and embrace that. The third area is experimentation, even as a leader, all right? We are in a player-coach mode, okay? So I always refer to Pete Rose, right? He put himself in when he needed to, right? But he knew he had to coach the team. So we have to think about this player-coach mode. Get out there and experiment. When I think about my children today, all three of them know that they need to go and work on some sort of generative AI at least an hour per day, right? Because these are the jobs of the future and the jobs of today, to be quite frank. And even myself, you'll see me on Bard, you'll see me on Chat GPT, you'll see me on Gamma, just experimenting and building up prompts. The fourth area is make sure that you keep the right people in the right seats. And right people are the ones who have embraced your vision and mission, and they are looking to go where you are in terms of the North Star that you set, as well as they're doing the job that they're designed to do, that they have the skills and the competencies for. And that part of that is knowing what you don't like to do. Like, I am not the detailed person, so my general counsel needs to handle all of that. We've got some other players there. So there are four. I usually stop on a prime number, but I want to...
No, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And smart people surround themselves with smarter people.
Yes.
So what's the best way for someone to contact you?
Best way. So listen, I'm on LinkedIn, so you can always go to my LinkedIn profile, Ibrahim Jackson. It's right at the end. You can go to ubiquitouspreferred.com. That's our website. Or you can call Tiffany, who's in the studio being quiet, and she'll get you routed here.
Ibrahim Jackson, we'd like to thank you. Thank you for being with us today. Ibrahim is the CEO of Ubiquitous Preferred Services, Inc.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. This was fun.
What's the one thought that you'd like to leave our listener with?
As you know, Ray, I typically work in three. So I will tell you, if it was one, I would say embrace change. The second is start your day with affirmations that help you to be great and can foster a sense of belonging for those who are around you. And then the third is do your best to teach someone else something new and be open to learning from that same individual.
I love it. Thank you so much, Ibrahim. Really enjoyed having you here and enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to leave you with DB's philosophy. Personal disruption is the vehicle through which success and economics travels grow. Nikki Verdi.
We want to thank you for being with us. My name is Ray Schwetz, along with Donyshia Boston-Hill, your co-host and producers. Visit nccradio.org for more information. We're available on Odyssey, TuneIn, iHeartRadio, as a podcast on iTunes, Android Podcasts, and Spreaker. This has been Tower Talk Business Radio, powered by the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.